Well, hello everyone. Good Friday afternoon, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the fourth installment of the Gretsch Afternoon Drum Break. I'm excited to be here. It seems like we just did one of these a few days ago, and it's hard to believe that the weeks go by as quickly as they do. And what I'm going to do is I am going to give a little bit of an introduction to our guest before I bring him on. And he is a fabulous drummer based in the Toronto, Ontario area. Born in Hamilton, plays a wide variety of music, plays a lot of jazz, has a lot of Gretsch drums, which is awesome. And he is one of the most in-demand people to play live. He is also an instructor, as we will get to know some of his background, an amazing educator, and an all-around really nice guy. And I'm going to bring him on here. I'm with my guest, Mr. Anthony Michelli. Looking forward to having a good chat with him today. I am waiting for him to join the conversation here, but I wanted to thank Fred and Dinah Gretsch, and I want to thank Lena at GretschGear.com. If you need any Gretsch wearables, if you need any Gretsch collectibles, that is the place to get it, GretschGear.com. It is licensed. And ladies and gentlemen, drum roll, please. Here we go. Mr. Anthony Michelli, how are you, sir? Nice to see you.
I'm good, thanks. Nice to see you too.
And
Nice to see you too.
And
it's great to be here.
Welcome to the show. This is a lot of fun. And as I was telling you on the phone yesterday, I remember seeing you play. I remember hearing about you before, and then I recognized you at a gig. I was playing a country gig, and you were playing a jazz gig indoors, and I was doing an outdoor thing, and I saw you play, and the rest of the band was there, and they looked at me as if to say, "Can you do that?" So anyways, and it was great.
Thank God.
Really, I think we actually chatted, but you don't remember, but that's okay.
Well, it's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, a few thousand gigs ago.
When there were gigs.
Yes,
that's right.
I know. How are you holding up with everything?
Pretty good, actually. It's been, it's been a change, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is that the teaching sort of wrapped up with a bunch of the online stuff. And I've been able to practice and study and work on stuff and get the things that I haven't been able to and learn new things. And,
That's great.
Yeah.
Good for you. We'll get
awesome.
into that, yes, because I definitely want to pick your brain and see what it is that you're working on. So that is good. I'm glad that you're doing well. I know a lot of people have kind of adapted to an online kind of format. I don't teach online. I don't have a recording rig or anything. But what I do for my students is I'll record videos with the iPad, the 45 seconds, and say, here's kind of, the groove to this, and send them the chart and say, okay, go ahead and video and send it back to me. It's the only alternative I have. So, but
that's great.
Well, it works, and it keeps the students, because they're pretty young, keeps them doing something. So,
yeah.
Wow.
This is learning a bit about technology too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, which is good. And I enjoy. Thank you for providing me those the music from the little promo clip and all those pictures and all of those drums. That was awesome, and learn how to do all that stuff. So I wanted to dive in, and kind of see where things began with you musically way back when.
Okay. Well, I mean, I sent. I'm kind of, as you said, I'm a bit of a Gretsch fanatic, and have been from the beginning, actually. Some of the pictures that I sent you, one of them in particular is my first drum set with a couple of add-on toms that I'd gotten, which was like the traditional mahogany lacquer finish, the beautiful 80s drums that I have. And I still have them. I'll show you them later. But yeah, I guess, I started just listening to music as a kid through my sister and my brother, as you've mentioned in the promo. Just being the youngest of three, I got to hear a lot of stuff before I even knew how to play music. And so that had a big influence on my life. And then my parents were always really interested in music and dancing and singing, and that was part of their culture. And
It's amazing.
Music was always around, so it was really important to us. And it's not like as if we felt privileged by any chance, by any means, but it was um, just a normal thing for us. You know what I mean?
That's amazing. And now you started off with accordion, you said?
Yeah, actually, as a kid,
Yeah.
again, the last of three, I was the last one. The last hope for an Italian family to have an accordion player in the house.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So it was me. But I did like 4 years of that, 3 or 4 years,
Wow.
maybe a little more than that. Studied with a couple of teachers, like from the get-go. And interestingly enough, that first teacher that I had commonly was shared with a colleague of mine who ended up being bandmate, and he was the first. He was also a drummer and a keyboard player, Frank. And when we got into high school and started taking it more seriously, I mean, I've skipped over a whole bunch of stuff, but he was the guy who had the drums that I was able to play on because I didn't know my own drums.
Okay. Yeah.
So he let me use his drums for the band rehearsals and then eventually for the gigs because we put together a band. So before that, I mean, learning accordion and some repertoire and like the coordination of the left and right hands,
Yeah, that's cool.
melody, harmony.
Yeah.
Pretty complex stuff when I think about it now because I try to get back to it and it's like, whoa, I can't believe I used to play this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But in elementary school, a couple other friends of mine, a very close friend that I grew up with who lived the street over, Mikey. I'm going to drop a lot of names
Yeah,
that people
please
don't
do.
know
Yep.
because they're really important to my development. Equally as important as some of the big iconic drummers. These guys were a big part of my development. So,
Great.
yeah, him and Steve, Mikey and Steve, we started a little trio called the All Canadian Junk Band, I think it was called. The All Canadian or All American Junk Band, I can't remember. So it was elementary school, and for one of the assemblies, we were a percussive based band, and the three of us played percussion, and it wasn't like instruments; it was pots and pans and pails, and I think we had a gong too with our name on it. It was a
Oh,
makeshift gong. Do
wow.
you remember the tripod? Remember those tripod tables that you snap the thing on the top of,
Oh, yeah,
and then
yeah.
you take it outside for coffee or whatever. Well, that was our gong. The top of it was our gong, so we painted something on it.
And how old would you be at this point?
I can't even remember that. I mean, it feels like ages ago, even though it was yesterday.
Yes, right.
Uh, like grade 6, 5, 6, 7. I don't remember. Probably 7,
Okay.
7, 8. So always kind of playing stuff, and we made our own instruments, and
That's crazy.
yeah, and like being of European descent, and same with the other guys, we had a lot of skills, a lot of hands-on skills on how to build,
Yeah.
take apart and stuff. So like we made all our own instruments, and I think Mikey still has a photo somewhere. His mom might have it of the final drum set, which was comprised of shallow pails for the toms, rack toms, and then floor tom would have been a deeper pail, and the bass drum might have been like a satin steel bass drum, and I think the hi-hat had some plexiglass. At one point, it used to be one of those garbage cans that you push the pedal down and the lid comes up.
God, that's awesome.
And
That's
just all kinds of
genius.
silly stuff.
That is
And then,
amazing.
yeah.
Wow. Are you
So,
kidding? That is crazy, right?
yeah,
Did
it
you have a
is. And
logo on them? Was there any kind of like, I'm just kidding.
we may have made something. I mean, we were pretty obsessive about it. We had to figure out how to mount the toms and put the stand, like all kinds of stuff. And that became a lot of why I love
Wow.
taking apart and fixing and actually refinishing or re-edging or
Yeah.
hammering stuff or cutting things. A
Yeah.
lot of that is just that kind of. I guess that was ingrained as a kid.
So you and
It's
Paul DeLong or about that. I say, oh, here's a drum set that I refinished. It's like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah, yeah.
I've
Paul's great
rewrapped
at that.
drums too, but not like you guys have. That's amazing.
Oh,
That's what an amazing thing to do, right? I mean, so you were drawn into playing drums so much at that young age, even though you were playing some other instruments, but you wanted to play the drums, and you played drums that way and by ear up until you were in your later teens. Is that correct?
Yeah, what ended up happening was I thought, okay, great. I graduated from elementary school, going to high school. I'm going to take music. And I thought, all right, I'm going to have the opportunity to play the drum set because there's a school band, right?
Yeah.
And then I get into the music program, and great teacher Rod Corso, he was excellent and really exposing a lot of stuff from repertoire to theory, harmony, all kinds of stuff, and just a great guy. And the great thing about that was I didn't get the drum chair because there was already a guy playing drums in the band. So like at the time, I thought that was a really horrible thing.
Yeah. But it
All
was a
along,
blessing. Yep.
yeah. So I had to pick another instrument, and the alto saxophone was the first one. I did that for a year, and then switched to tenor for 2. And of course, I'm not an accomplished saxophone player by any means, but I understand where everything is, and I know about sound and like how to get around the instrument. But I've after playing with so many phenomenal musicians, it's just like I don't even mention that publicly too much,
Yeah. Right.
But it really brings an appreciation for a lot of things like sound, melody, harmony, all that stuff that is really important that drummers think about and like great drummers know about.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily play it when they're playing the drums, right? Necessarily, it's not perceived that way.
Right.
So I got a lot of that,
Yeah.
as a just as a good sort of foundational understanding of music beyond, plus the accordion and repertoire and stuff, right?
That's great.
So at the end, I'll just end it by saying at the end of high school, that's when we started this band, and we just started learning repertoire and trying to get gigs. And my brother had already been playing in professional bands, like doing weddings and functions and stuff, but it was excellent. So I used to go and watch them play and stare at the drummers
Oh,
that
I
they
know.
had. Great drummer Jack DiDomenico from Toronto ended up. He was in the band for many years, and even the keyboard player Tony, who was eventually my second accordion teacher. He was the band. He was one of the band leaders or whatever, one of the forefathers with that group of guys. So I would go and watch them, and I'd sit there and stare at the drummer. And it's funny because I would do that all the time, go out to hear music with my family, like a dinner dance, a wedding,
Yep.
or whatever. And I'd stare at the drummer constantly. And I'd be there going the same thing what you said, right? And I'd be that guy, and I still am. It's funny.
Yep. Me too. People think I'm weird. Like, why? Either he's or he's a drummer. Something's wrong with this guy, or he's a drummer, and then they find out you're a drummer. Which you're both.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so
anyways,
when did you get the Gretsch kit? That Gretsch kit that was that on the pic that you sent me. You look like you'd be maybe 17, 18.
Yeah.
Something
That was like that was the end of high school, grade 13 or whatever.
Yeah.
And at that point, the band that we had started with those younger guys in high school, a couple of guys went separate ways, and we played gigs and stuff together. But then eventually, I started playing with that band that I just told you about. My brother was in, and we played for years together. So when that happened, there was a family friend who had actually I started to take drum lessons with a guy named Ernie Portos, great teacher and
Okay.
great guy, and both classical percussionist and drum set player, fantastic musician.
Okay.
So I was starting to take lessons with him before having drums, and he had like a set of Milestones and a set of Gretsch, beautiful set of Gretsch drums, right? And I'd sit on those every day, like every time I went for my lesson, and like that was the first sound I got into my ear, really, you know what I mean? On a pro level. So I was, working stuff out at home on my pails and going back. And then eventually he recommended, I think it was through him or through a family friend, that this other musician in town had a couple of drum sets, and he was trying to sell a small Gretsch set. And it was a 12, 14, 20. Just perfect, right? And I still have them. I'm looking at them right now. I'll show you after. And that was my first set, and I got them in time for the first gig with that band.
Wow.
So it was kind of insane, right?
And what
The
color are those? Are that the blue ones that are there or no?
I recently changed the because they were I added on tongs to them and then I accumulated more sizes and I just wanted to have like a rather I didn't need a large drum set, but I wanted to have a bunch of different sounds
Okay.
and configurations that I could use. So I ended up accumulating from 8 to 16 and then two different bass drum sizes, 20 and 22. And so they were kind of scuffed up, some of them, and some of them were mismatched and stuff. So I just decided as a project to refinish them. And so I started stripping them here at home, and I realized this is going to, with that many drums, it's going to take me a long time. So I ended up calling a dear friend, Seppo, who runs
Yep.
TRS, and
Yes.
is a great tech and an excellent drum builder. And I asked him if I could come up and hang out and take some information from him and
Yep.
use his space. And so I ended up stripping them there, sanding them, restaining them, doing a couple of fun things that I thought would make them unique. And and then he lacquered them for me. Because he's a pro at that, and I didn't want
Yeah.
to do that because I would ruin them. And
Yep.
but I mean, it's just phenomenal. They're like brand new to me now. It's like incredible. So those are they're like the dark blue with a bit of a lighter fade in the middle. But I put a green run strip through the center. I just let the stain run around it. I'll show you.
Yeah.
You want to see them
Yeah.
now, or should I show you after?
Yeah. Sure.
This is tricky because I have this thing on a stand. It's an
Yes.
iPad. So.
Ta-da! Me too, and I don't dare touch mine.
Oh yeah. Well, here we go, guys. You're gonna see my forehead, fingers, and
That's
by the
all
way, I
right.
can't.
But we get to see your beautiful Gretsch drums. We're losing some signal. Ta-da! Let's see. We are. Are you still there, Anthony?
There we
Hey,
go.
there we go. We're back.
Back on. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the set. It's a pretty big set. Like I said, I rarely ever play live with these babies, but hard to do with an
Man.
iPad. Hey,
Uh,
look at that. I'm seeing a bunch of people that I know here. I didn't even realize.
yes, Charlie Cooley is here, our good friend.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
students,
Lucas,
some
Daniel Book.
colleagues. Man,
And my
amazing.
son is here. Yeah, my boy is here.
Hey, very cool.
Michelle Truman, my friend
Yeah,
Ian.
Larry Graves, awesome. So look at that. So these are the drums, and that's the little green stain that I put on them.
Oh, that
And
is cool.
so it's like a run in the finish. So it made it unique to me, and I didn't care because I knew I was never going to sell these. And
Yeah.
so that's it. So this is part of that set. It's got a 8, 10, the original 12, the 20-inch bass drum, the 14, which is the original, 16 add-on. Yeah,
Are those
so that's
70s
that.
or 80s drums? Look like
These
they're
are
set
80s.
80s.
They're like late 70s, early 80s, I
Yep.
guess.
Yep.
I think, there you see a badge. It's kind of dark,
Yeah. Yeah, I
but
can see that.
it's
Yep.
in the studio. Go from here.
Now,
Oh,
do you know if there was stain over top of the bearing edge? If the stain head was from the factory, did that happen? Paul DeLong was talking about that, saying that those are the really good Gretsch drums to have. I have a kit of
yeah,
those, but yep.
I think that like a lot of them were, yeah, and it's one of those things that you find out the details about how things how you can figure things out more and more. And I was going to say the Gretsch book that's out. I don't know if you have that or not, but
I do.
um,
The Rob Cook,
that has a
the
lot of
Chet
good
Falzarano one.
details.
The
It,
Chet book?
I'm
Yep.
not
The
sure who
green.
wrote it, but I got to put this back on the stand because it's awkward.
They're one. They're,
Um, I was just going to say that I've talked to Paul about that. Anytime I have questions, I'll call
yep.
him or I'll
Yep.
call. I'll send an email to Paul Cooper or.
Yes. Paul Cooper is incredible. I tell you, anytime I've shipped some drums down to him. I had a bearing edge that needed to be trued on the bottom of one. I shipped it to him, and he actually did it himself, and then sent it back to me. And probably a month or so later, and he was just He was just terrific. So they do great work at the factory. For any
You there?
viewers here who have not been, there we go.
There we go.
Yes, we're
Sorry.
good. I was just saying that I've had great fortune with Paul Cooper,
Yeah.
doing some quick repairs for me, and being great. Customer service has been outstanding. Everybody from B&J, and it's David McAllister's birthday today too. So happy birthday,
Hey, happy
David!
birthday, David. Yeah, happy birthday. That's
And
awesome.
the
David's great.
customer service is great. So that's a beautiful drum kit. So was that the first one, and then you added on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did, and I've kept it. And to be honest with you, it's the reason I went full circle back to that set, and I use it here for studio stuff, or sometimes I'll play with it out live, depending on what the gig is, and obviously, I mean, unless I'm playing a prog rock thing or some massive metal gig or something, I probably wouldn't bring that many drums out. I normally don't, to be completely honest. But
No, no.
you know, it's great to have choices, and I'm a bit of a fan of choices.
I two bass drum sizes as well, a 20 and a 22, and
Yeah,
you need that to cover the bases. I don't want to bring a big 22 out, especially if I'm playing in a small place.
totally.
And sonically, and the way that you approach the drums is different. So
Mm,
anyway, let's dive into the career a little bit more. So you started
yeah.
playing when you were in your later teens in some bands, and then what happened? Fill us in.
Um, well, did a whole bunch of stuff in that Hamilton area, both jobbing, which was pretty much every weekend. It's kind of crazy, you know, and the amount of gigs and the amount of income that we had was quite substantial for that time, right? And then I was also doing like I went to college. I got into college. I took private lessons, and I got into college. Studied there with Kevin Dempsey and
Ah,
John Cheeseman, the late John Cheeseman. He just passed away.
yeah,
So
saw that, yeah.
uh, and what ended up happening was I just got further into it, and both in the studies of it as well as playing more. So I ended up having a house gig in Hamilton with some of my colleagues that I still play with sometimes. Um, and we played every Monday night at a cafe. And, you know, we didn't make a big amount of money, but we got to play for, you know, I think that gig lasted 3 years. So we played, like when I say we played, I mean like we really went for it, because the owner of the cafe didn't care what we did. They weren't putting any kind of restrictions on us on our
Wow.
musical. So we got to really experiment and cut our teeth with things. And you know, I built a lot of close relationships, like with Mike Felice is a very close friend of mine who we spent a lot of time playing together, and there all the way throughout. We still play together in other bands now. So
Wonderful.
those connections you make with people just kind of last on.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then, you know, I got further into, as when you're studying, you're checking out all the greats, and a lot of them were coming to Canada and coming up to from the States and maybe even from Europe and
Yep.
playing. And so I would always make an effort to get in the car with whoever it was and drive to Toronto or wherever the gigs were, Buffalo, whatever, and go and watch
Hmm.
these guys. And I got to meet and talk to a lot of the greats before they passed away. And
Yeah.
people like Elvin Jones and Tony Williams. And uh, I mean, I have cassette tapes of clinics that I've gone to. So basically, I just kind of went nuts on digging deep, and still
Yeah.
studying. You know, I studied with, I took one-offs with people like Vito Rezza, and
Mm.
who I still is a dear friend,
Yeah.
and still shares a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then like Joel Rosenblatt came to town one year,
Oh.
and I had lifted a tune for my recital, and took a lesson with him up at, I don't remember, what was that called, Drummer's Choice or something like that, up in North Toronto. He came to the clinic, and Vinny came through several times. I
Yep.
recorded him, listened, like I still listen to these tapes
Yep.
like it was yesterday, and it's again, it's the kid factor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you never stop, right? You never stop learning. Um,
Now, were these jazz
yeah.
gigs that you were doing, let's just be clear, were they more jazz gigs, or was it a mix of a bunch of different things?
Okay, so when I was in college, they were more jazz gigs, pop gigs, rock gigs, funk
Yeah.
gigs. Okay,
Wow.
and then Hamilton had a great R&B scene too. There's a lot of guys coming up from Detroit, and there was
Yeah.
good clubs. So I got to play a lot of that music, learned a lot of repertoire, a lot of James Brown and all that, like
Wonderful.
all the old stuff. And the drummers, and like we talk about Hamilton now being an arts town. I mean, it was always an arts town. The musicianship in Hamilton is pretty amazing, and the guys that come out of there are pretty strong. And I have a affinity for that city, not just because I was born there, but because of the people that were really um, amazing, right? Great players, and they've gone on
Yeah.
to do other things, whether they moved away or still live there. You know, I mean, there's so many. There's a list of guys you can just, you can just
Yeah, it's an amazing city
look it up.
for that. Lots of great, and same with places like London. You don't need, when
Yeah.
you're in Hamilton, you could make a living playing music in Hamilton. I don't know what it's like now, or I don't know what it's like now, really, kind of anywhere. But it was
Mhm.
really insular, and you could do a lot. There's lots of great musicians out of
Mhm.
Hamilton. So
Well, the thing was is that as I was finishing up college and like I started to realize that for what I wanted to focus more on, I had to get out of Hamilton because of the city was sort of limited in the venues that it had that
okay,
and actually the people what they wanted to hear, right?
right,
So and I also wanted to continue my education, sort of. I thought that I would never go to school after college, and I ended up moving to Toronto. I was either going to go to the States somewhere, maybe New York or
yep.
something, or Toronto, Montreal kind of thing. Nice
Hmm.
mug.
Thank you. I
I
know.
got to get one of those.
We'll make sure you got one.
um, so I moved to Toronto and started, at University of Toronto and got to study with some great teachers there. Bob McLaren and Barry Holmes were two of the guys that I studied with there. And uh, got further into playing with some of the teachers, which turned into more
Yes.
of a professional career in the jazz scene. So I did a bunch of jazz gigs and that, and still some experimental stuff. And when I say jazz, I don't just mean straight ahead. I mean like contemporary, or like there's so many different
Yeah.
parts of that, just like any other genre.
Yes.
So got to play around all that stuff, and at the end of that, studying with Jim Blackley
Oh,
for a
okay. Yep.
year and a bit, which is
Yeah.
really great. He's an awesome teacher and has great
Yeah.
resources. For anyone looking for resources, he's got a ton of them out, and they're all really
Yes.
systematic and good. Um, so I started playing also in a band which was signed eventually to Warner. It was an independent act, and it wasn't jazz. We took elements of creative music and jazz and put them into more popular funk stuff
Okay.
and rock and popular music. And it was started by a guy named Jason Beck, who is actually known as Chili Gonzalez now, who lives I think he's in Berlin or in, yeah, I think he's in Berlin. He went to back and forth Berlin and Paris.
Okay.
And so that band, we toured a lot across Canada with, opening up for Bare Naked Ladies, Big
What was
Sugar,
the band then?
Everclear.
What were
The
you?
name of
What?
the band, the
Yeah.
name of the band was called Sun, Son, and it was an indie band, and
Awesome.
we pretty much recorded it all in the basement and in a dance studio and stuff like that. Put it out. Warner rep went to Sam the Record Man, picked it up off the shelf because he liked the cover, and it was called Thriller. So I guess that was part of
Awesome. That
his
is great.
yeah. I think Thriller, Michael Jackson's Thriller was actually it was like the number one record of the time. So he said, "Well, I'm going to call my record Thriller." So the record guy from Warner picked it up, checked it out, loved it, and then we signed a deal with them and did all this touring, opening up for all these different bands and stuff.
That
So
is
we
awesome.
had a lot of fun,
And that was
and
in
I
the night.
used that was in the early, well, I can't even remember, late '90s,
Okay.
early 2000s.
Yep.
Um, and one of I think maybe a couple of the tours that were sort of van tours, I used my Champagne Sparkle round badge Gretsch, believe it or not, with an 18 by 16 bass drum,
Are
and
you kidding?
it was unbelievable. The sound men loved it. We
Yeah.
like on one of the tours we traveled with our own sound man, and he loved it because it just got out of the way of all the bass frequencies and the way that I tuned it, the heads that I used. So it was kind of a bit of a shock for people to see, "Look, what the hell's like?" I was kind of going nuts on the drums, and it's like this jazz kid. So,
Wow.
but it was really amazing. And the thing about the roundover edge, like we're starting to talk drums now, is that they have a lot of bark to them. If you lay into them, they really speak,
They do.
and they decay quicker too. So the beauty of that was it wasn't like a boo sound. It was like a smash to the head. You know what I mean? So tuned well, they sounded great.
And what would you using for heads for that kind of gig?
I would have been using probably like a G1 on the top, or you know what I mean, and the original permatones on the bottom. I don't think I ever took those off on that
Yeah.
round
Yeah,
bench sparkle kit.
for years.
Um, so, and the other thing about those roundover things is that when you crank them up, they do sound like I have a set right here, like an original set. I don't know if you can hear that, but these are two
That's
kind
Max
of,
Rotai.
that's the kind of thing, I was listening to an old Tony
Love it.
record, and
Yes.
and just kind of went, wow, what's that tuning he's got? And I was trying to match the sound to hear it, and So, anyways, this is like and it's like again, I'm worried to move the stand because I'll just do this. Maybe that'll help.
Oh, there we go. Oh, look at
This is
that.
it's a bit of a hybrid set. It's a rewrap,
Yep.
and here we go. It's just a blue
Oh,
sparkle rewrap,
babe.
and
The
vintage
muffler.
shells.
Look at
Yeah,
that.
beautiful, and the round over edge, right? Which is fantastic. And there's nothing that oh, well, you love these, right? These are like,
I do. I really do.
oh man, you know. And so, with the rail console LED on the bass
Yeah.
drum, and
Yeah. You're a pretty
so,
tall guy, though, are you?
yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I am.
Now, you find, does it go high enough for you, or is that a special? Did you modify the rail? Is it a special? Um,
Yeah, what's interesting is that I used to think it was too low, and
yep.
then in speaking with Vito, actually, we were talking about height, sitting on the stool, and I used to
Yep.
sit a little higher, and he talked about sitting lower,
Yep.
and so I started to check that out, and all of a sudden, there's no issue with sitting lower. So it's actually the heights are really kind of really close and comfortable for this kind of thing. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So here's some more drum stuff. This is a new reissue. It's the 14 5, 4.5, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
And I asked Paul and Andrew, we talked about this, to do the round over edge on that. So if you could see that round over edge.
Look at that.
Yeah. And so that basically just puts it into a certain era of sound, which I was going for with this drum set. And the thing that I love about these drums is that, first of all, you got a choice between throw-offs,
Yeah.
and I love
I,
the micro sensitive. I really love this. You
isn't
push
it
the little lever
amazing?
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So you can adjust it on this side, but you can also adjust it on this side.
Yep.
And for me, having studied, well, actually, initially with Ernie Porthouse and Jean Ideluca, Jean Normand Ideluca, who's a classical symphony um, master, if you want to call him that, timpanist, snare drum.
Yep.
We talked about the snares. A lot of guys put their snare throw off on the side because it's easier, it doesn't get in the way, and it can turn it on and off with their left hand.
Yeah.
But the thing with this was that I run the snares going this way so that I can, so I can play over the surface of the snare bed rather than this way, because this sound, no matter how well you tune your drum, the sound on this side will sound different from the sound on that side if you're running your snare this way. So from what I understood, when you're running it over the bed this way, from your belly button to the tom-tom, you're always over the snare bed, and your sticks are always in line with each other. So you really try to keep a consistency of sound. So in the studio, it makes a huge difference, because as you know, if you hit your
Yeah. Just even a little bit away.
yeah. So if you're trying to get an even tone, right?
That is cool.
and you're doing this or that, you're not going to get an even tone. And in the studio, it's really obvious.
And you know,
Or,
Neil Peart used to have his snare wires that way. He'd have his throw off between his legs like that. So
oh yeah, I talked to him about that. I just recommended that to him.
good. I
That's
thought you
funny.
might have.
Bless him. Yeah, yeah. Are you kidding? I have a funny Neil Peart story, which
Oh,
was
tell me.
I didn't really get the opportunity to meet him, but oops, this cable's hanging over. But I did master a record that we did in England at Reaction Studios when they were recording. And so Rush was in the main room with all their gear. They weren't there, but all their gear was. And I was in the mastering suite.
Wow.
And I was lucky because we knew the engineers well. And he just said, come on, I'll show you. And I just stood, like he showed me all the guitars, and then he showed me all of Geddy's basses and stuff like that. And then I went into the room where the drums were. It was the main room. Like if you can imagine, the main room is the size of, a gymnasium almost, or at least half of one. And it was pretty much Neil's room. And so I just stood on his riser. Obviously, I didn't sit down or touch anything or play anything. And I just sat there and looked and just was overwhelmed by it, And
Yeah.
silly thing is I should have I thought, this is in retrospect, I wanted to leave him a record and say thank you, like a little note, but I never did. I said, he won't like it. And I regret it.
Well, I know, right? That's amazing. What drum kit was that was there? Do you remember?
Oh jeez.
The D-dubs. Do you know what time frame?
I think
I'm a huge Neil fan.
I think it might have been either the transition into the DWs or
the Ludwigs,
or just before that, the Ludwig set. I have a feeling it was the DWs.
Yeah,
I can't recall clearly because I was just kind of shocked. I wasn't checking out, the brand or anything. I was just like,
I know,
oh
it's him. It's his.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Wow.
Yeah, and so again, like we talked about the wow factor as a kid, right? Like what adult looks at a drum set and goes, oh, we're a unique breed, right? Like we kind of lose our minds over this.
I miss going to drum stores. Hey, first of all, I live in Aurelia. I live outside of Aurelia, so there's a few stores here.
Yeah.
But as far as, I need to go down to Murat's store or JD's store.
Yeah, both great stores and great guys.
That's when you inhale that sound, that smell of drums. And when JD and I've seen Murat have some Gretsch kits, I'm like, what is that? So that's amazing.
Yeah, they're coming through more. Yeah.
Going back to how you kind of became one of the cats or one of the main Toronto first call guys. I mean, I know, and Charlie Corey's the same thing, but it's true. Like you're getting called for great kinds of gigs and better gigs than the average person. You're a Gretsch endorser, a Peisty endorser as well, and there's a few other endorsements that you have. So you're doing something right as far as what happened next? So we're kind of like the early mid 2000s here. Oh, look at that. Hello, what's that?
Talking about timeline.
Oh no.
Do you have one of these, Neil?
I don't. What is that?
This is the timeline. Like you just brought up timeline, so you reminded me of this.
I don't have that.
And you'll get it in your little package, I'm sure. I got this down at NAMM. Actually, Fred Gretsch gave me this. But it's basically the timeline from the inception to today. And you'll check, I'm sure you'll see it.
Yes.
As we take a sip of our Gretsch.
Yes, some Gretsch coffee. It tastes better in the Gretsch mug. It really does. I've had this a long time too. And the shirt.
Yeah, that's awesome. You got to love the logo, right? That logo is unbelievable.
Oh, I tell you. Oh, Lucas said he'll send me one. Oh, I'd love that. Lucas, thank you so much. So that's, what? I swear the family really makes you feel like a family. What is that snare drum? Hello.
Oh, I'll show you. Yeah, I'm just moving out of the way, get some more light in my face.
I like this interview.
This is kind of like show and tell. I'm a little bit worried about that, but
we want to post your address.
Yeah, right. So you're asking, sorry, just to go back to what you're asking. I'm so sorry I got
No,
distracted
it's
with that whole
good.
thing.
Early, what kind of happened after that? So you did go. You said you went to school, and you were also playing in that band with the round badge
Yes,
kit.
Sun. Yeah, that band,
Son,
Sun. And
Thriller.
yeah, Thriller, exactly, right. Yeah, I remember like so many great shows. I got to hear the Real Statics close
Oh, I
up. I
know
got
those
to
guys.
hear
Yeah, yeah,
like
yep.
all these phenomenal bands, you
The
know,
Rios were
and
crazy. Yeah,
crazy great, man. Um, what happened was I just moved to Toronto, started playing more and more, and just kept playing because it was what I needed to do, and that's what, that's what we were wired to do, and it just kind of grew. You know what I mean? And I've got a great friend base, colleagues. Like when I say colleagues, I mean fellow drummers, and like they're brothers of the drum or whatever,
yeah,
and a good uh, group of people that kind of grew together and um, just
yeah,
kind of helped each other out a little bit and inspired each other to keep going and to study more. And like,
yeah.
again, the teachers as well, and then the people along the way. Like, so, I mean, like that band, after about a couple of years, ended up, he ended up doing his own thing, and I ended up playing more jazz after that. I mean, just studio stuff and making original music. That was the big part of what I focused on, is not to like I really felt like I needed to work on stuff that was my own, you know what I mean?
Mm.
To find out who I was, kind of thing. After having and still studying the greats, I just feel like that helped me to focus on my own growth. So, I
That's
mean,
great.
things just developed, and I just kept trying to learn. And like the thing about it is, like, I guess if you're a professional, you take it seriously. When someone gives you a gig, you learn the repertoire.
Yeah,
You show up with good
but the
sounding equipment. You show up with the right attitude, and then you just, you know, and you have the tools of the trade, and you just kind of, uh, going to study with somebody actually is not just for you to learn. It's also helping them understand where you're at. And a lot of the times people recommend you for things. Uh,
awesome. Right.
so when you put in the work and do what you're supposed to do, people will recognize that. Even though sometimes we can get caught up going, oh, so I don't have a gig this week or whatever it is, this month, this
Sure.
year,
I know. Right.
ever again.
You mean 2020? Yes.
Yeah. Um, so, and it kind of grows on its own. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain in the middle of it all, but in
Was it ever
retrospect, that's
planned?
it.
Did you have a plan? Did you say I'm going to do this and this and this?
My plan was to play as much as possible and play original music as much as possible
Interesting.
and study and get better. And it
That sounds
still
like
is my
yeah.
plan, really. I didn't say by the age of 15, I want to do this. By the age of 16, I want to do that. Like, I didn't do that. Like, I would talk a lot about this in a career development. Like, now people are thinking more about how to set goals and work towards them.
Yes.
It felt like back then it was a little more organic and it felt
Yeah.
more natural that way. So
Yeah.
I didn't sit there and write down specific goals all the time. I knew specifically what I wanted to. I knew I wanted to move. I knew who I wanted to study with. I knew
Yes.
who I want like what I needed to learn. So all those things worked. I did keep logs of things that I worked on.
Yes. Yeah. And it's good. Yeah,
So
to do that as well. That's good.
yeah.
Very
So that
interesting.
yeah, and taking challenges. I went to study in the Banff Center with people who were way over my head from all over the world. That turned into world connections. Studying at Lake Placid, that turned into
Wow.
connections with people like Erskine and Gary Peacock and Maria Schneider, Bob Brookmeyer, like all these really heavy duty uh, people. And
World
then I
class.
got to play with my colleagues over the years, people like Reza Bassi, who's a New York guitarist, or people in England. Those connections sort of happen because you're on that level, and you stay close, and you work towards doing things. So that turns into gigs, and turns into um, tours, and I got to tour also a lot with a trio here in Toronto, piano-based trio, Steve Coven and Rob Clutton,
Yes. Yep.
and so we've done a lot of worldwide touring. Thanks to him for his ability to set things up. He's pretty much self-promoted, and
Yep.
and so we got to travel a lot of places and represent Canada. It's pretty amazing, right?
That is
And
amazing.
you know,
That's a great
sometimes,
work ethic, I think, that you have is, and I know, and I hate to quote The Rock, but Dwayne Johnson says he's the hardest working guy in the room. And I find the harder that I got, the
yeah.
luckier that I got. And the phone would ring. And I swear it was very funny when I started studying with Blackley,
Hmm.
the phone rang that day. It really did.
It's
On the way
amazing.
home
Yeah.
from his lesson, it was just, I'm not sure if he called somebody. Son,
Hmm.
call him for a gig, something crazy like Charlie Cooley's asking a question. Are there a
Oh
couple
yeah.
of standout gigs with Steve or others? Hey, Charlie.
Standout. Hey, Charlie. Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, holy cow. Um, I remember a funny story, I'll tell you. And I hope Steve doesn't mind, but it was awesome.
Oh,
We, where were we? I think we were in Columbia, and we were playing at one of the big universities down there, the main one. I can't remember the name of it. It was in Bogota, and I think the promoter and the driver, or the person who was taking care of us, translator driver, they had two different start times for our concert. So the promoter had bumped it a half hour earlier, and we didn't know. So we're like after sound check, we went back to the hotel and we were just having some dinner and chilling
yep,
out, getting ready to go.
yep.
And the funny thing was that we're sitting at the table eating, and I remember the guy who was our translator answering and just saying, "Oh, we got to go. They're chanting and they're getting rowdy out there." And it's like, so what do you mean? So we had to jump in the bus, get back to the venue, like get changed as fast as possible, get back to the venue, and and it was insane because it was one of those indoor uh, um, theaters, pretty big theater that seated, I don't know, maybe 1,200 or something like that, or maybe a little bit more, university theater. And then outside, they had the big screens. So it was a big festival down there. I mean, I find that in South America, there's a lot of really big festivals. And in like, they tend to celebrate music and the arts um,
Yes.
in a big way, like everybody, like as a society. So anyways, the sort of area where the big screen TVs were was full with another like 2,000 people, and they're all chanting because they're getting impatient that no one's starting and this concert's supposed to happen. And like, and we're in the middle of we're in the middle of Columbia. I'm like, oh no, what the hell? And so we get to the backstage, and because we're all revved up um, because of the charge of having to get ready, getting the bus flying around the bus because the driver's going nuts and trying to get us there in time. And then getting into the place where it's jam packed and people are chanting. And we're like, I felt like I was playing, with subbing in for Johnny Faye and the Tragically Hip, right? Because it was like that kind of rush that you
Yeah.
get when there's that. And so it's just like this adrenaline rush. And so I guess that Steve had this really great moment where they introduced us, and he came out, and for a second he thought he was a rock star, so he took his shirt and he went, "Wah!" He flashes the audience, goes back, and then we played the concert. So pretty hilarious, silly Canadian hoser stuff, right?
That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, pretty funny
Um,
stuff.
I wanted to ask you because we're
Yeah.
we're probably about 12 minutes away.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about your education, like that you actually teach. You teach at two places, do you?
Actually, I teach at three.
You teach at
Um,
three places.
I do. Yeah. That was a sponsored break.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, I've been at Mohawk College for a couple decades. I think this
Wow.
might be the 20th year if it happens.
Yep.
As a contract, York University for just about that, and then Centennial College for about 5 years, maybe I can't remember.
Right.
I can't recall, but they're all quite different, and the stuff that we teach and the classes that I'm doing and some of the performing, even the styles are much different.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. I really
What
like
do
the
you
variety
teach?
of.
What do you teach at Mohawk versus what's different between that and Centennial? What are the differences between those couple places?
Okay, well, like Mohawk is very similar to any other college. It has a lot of like jazz ensembles, like regular theory and all that stuff, like
Yep.
production. So I'll tell you what I teach, and that'll just decipher what it is. So at that school, I teach ensembles, lessons, master class, and then I teach a production course. I've taught business courses, and that's it for that school that I can recall. And then at York, it's
Mm-hmm.
careers course, Cuban music,
Wow.
which was not drum set. It was actually
And,
traditional
yeah.
traditional folkloric. So that for like did that for since I started working there actually. And then so more of the world music. And what else am I doing there? Ensemble and private lessons. And then Centennial is private lessons, which is not jazz or whatever. It's more like contemporary music
Okay.
and ensembles. And
Great.
yeah. So the great thing about it is that, like for instance, 2 years ago I had a metal band that was fantastic, and then this year like it was a prog kind of thing, or it was like a funky pop thing, or like so it wasn't just the old traditional
Okay.
jazz or whatever. So things are changing in that regard as well at the schools.
And
So it's good.
that's
Yeah,
great. So you
yeah,
you have a studio. We talked a little bit about
yeah,
this yesterday.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. What you have at home.
Okay, well, I have all these drums,
Yes.
and they I use uh, the set that's over here is my. I'm going to show you guys. I'm sorry. I really hope I'm not going to cut you off.
Oh, good. If we do, I'll sing.
You can sing.
Oh, oh,
Wow. So what do we
that,
got happening here? Do you see
there
anything?
we go. Oh,
Not
nice.
yet. Okay,
Nothing.
I'm here. I'm here. It's just that this thing is in the way. I'll just do that. This might help. Is that better?
Ah,
There you go. There you go.
holy smokes. And we're kind of cut off. I see these other comments here. Bathurst Street Theater with the Rheostatics. That was an amazing show back in the 90s. Ah, we are connecting there. What is that? Hello.
Okay, so this is the set that once I signed on with Gretsch with Andrew Shreve,
Yes.
who brought me on. Fantastic guy, great
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
friend. I guess sideways doesn't work, right?
No, we're going to go
Okay.
sideways. What is that kit? Okay.
Okay, this is an American custom kit that stays set up here unless I'm using them for a gig, and I use these for recording. So
Okay.
I'll use my you see a couple of snare drums in the background, some
A
auxiliary
couple.
percussion stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Over the years. Come on. And
Oh,
that's a satin Dakota red drum finish. So it's got that nice satin finish to it
oh,
and
baby.
gorgeous. And this snare drum is actually talking to Andrew. He recommended I was going for a particular sound where I wanted a really sharp, fast attack sound and really kind of um, not aggressive, but just like really quick reactive snare drum. So he talked about the 45 edge, which is not always typical with the Gretsch stuff.
Yes.
45 top and bottom,
Okay.
and 8 lug and 14.5. So I love it. And then that one there is a bronze, a
Yes.
deeper 6-inch bronze, beautiful drum.
Yep.
So that's a little 10, 12, 14, 16. So I leave those set up for recording.
God,
And
those are beautiful.
then the other, I don't normally keep these all set up here, by the way, just so that everybody
Okay.
realizes. Um,
This is his living room, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, I'm forced to live here because everyone else kicked me out of the house. So this is the little sort of like jazz kit that I use if I'm playing the clubs or stuff like that. So I basically have that set up over there, and I use that with either an iPad, which I have in my hand, or my laptop, and I go over to this side of the studio, and I go into my recording. This is where I do a lot of the writing and recording,
Well,
and I'll track from here, and I'll just do writing and do stuff. And so it's I mix and master and edit and my stuff and other people's stuff.
that
So
is
this is where I do
incredible.
that.
What's the software you're running there?
This is Presonus
Okay.
Studio One 4 Pro. It's great
Yeah.
if anyone's into that because I can produce it, edit it, and all that stuff. And then I've got a couple of a couple of different preamps and some
I see.
headphone monitors and all that stuff. And so this allows me to do some good work and have a good workflow and get good sounds. You know what I mean?
It's amazing how your life has kind of culminated into what you do now from a young age, playing accordion. Who knew that years later that you'd be playing and able to write and record in your own studio? Which is
Yeah.
that's fascinating. That would definitely be
I'll go
advice I
back
would
out here.
give to somebody who is young, wants to be
Hmm.
a musician. So because they will probably ask you like, what should I do?
Yeah.
And you definitely need to learn a melodic instrument, and you
Hmm.
need to study and you need to play, which is exactly what you've done. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I find more and more as we're, you and I are kind of a little bit older, and we're finding that we
I'm
have to
older too.
learn, we need
Yeah.
to learn the stuff, right? And, even for the fact that if you do go to a recording session, you could say to the engineer, you know, like, I need this, or I want this sound, and be specific about what you're looking for. Even if it's just to relay a message to somebody who knows, that you want to communicate with. It's really important. And
Yeah.
then now with all this technology going on, you got to be up on it, right? And so even just doing this is like it's really important to have, you know, being
People
able to do a live broadcast.
It's right. People with studios that were dormant for the last few years are now
Yeah.
there's a use for that, and that's wonderful. And I wish that I had done that sooner, but I'll take the plunge at some point. I'm going to see if there's anything else that I have on here. So, how long have you been a Gretsch drum endorser? What does it mean to you to be part of the family?
Okay. So, I mean, as we all know, like I said earlier, from my first drum set, I've always been a Gretsch fan. And as of, I think it was 2017, I made a switch back to playing Gretsch. And it was a tough decision, very tough decision, because um, I was torn. I was torn between the sound of my original drum set, which I
Yeah,
have and use, and and a fantastic company and a great group of people that supported me
yeah,
for 17 years, I believe, right? And they're still friends, and I still have tons of respect for them,
yeah.
I really value what I've had with the guys at Sonar, and
Mm.
um, very fortunate to have had that sort of support. And the thing was is that we didn't get into the career thing that much, but at the time I needed tour support because I was doing stuff in Europe,
Yes.
making records, and I needed that sort of support. And at that time they were there, and I was approached by a guy in England and got signed on over there. So I made the switch after I refinished my drums and realized that the original sound that I heard was really important to me. It took me a year to make that decision,
Wow.
and I didn't take it lightly. And
Yeah.
I really didn't want to just be one of those guys that said, oh, I'm going to switch because of whatever. No, it was actually it was really difficult for me to do that. And but the beauty is that I've been able to be a part of a couple of beautiful families of excellent drum makers. And the thing
Yeah.
about it is, we all know is that there's phenomenal drum makers out there. Every time you look online, there's a new phenomenal drum maker.
Yeah.
So it really came down to what I heard, what I needed, and then the people. So Andrew was the guy who reached out to me when he left Peisty, because I had been with him with
Okay.
Peisty.
Yep.
Originally it was Rich Manjacaro, and then Andrew took over for Rich, and then eventually got this job at Gretsch. And he called to tell me that he was leaving, and he just said, listen, if there's ever anything you need or any help or anything, just reach out, man. I'd love to continue working with you. And so at that, that had happened, and then a year had passed after I'd refinished my set, and then I thought I have to make this change because it's who I am and how I
Yeah.
feel. So
Be honest. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, but let's face it, like I said, there's so many fantastic drum makers out there,
There are.
but
We
these
have
ones
about
resonate with
40,
me.
we have about 40 seconds left. I'm really sorry. Where can people find you on the web? We can find you on Facebook and find you on Instagram
Yeah, I
and
guess.
your website as well.
Yeah, just AnthonyMichelli.com. There's an email link. You can send that. That's a little out of date. I haven't. I got to figure out how to. I got to get someone to do my website up again. So there's that, and there's all the sort of social media stuff. My name, ANTHONYMICHELLI, spelt.
Sounds
I
like
mean, Michelli.
Thank you so much. We have
Yeah.
5 seconds to go. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you for watching, and I appreciate you. We'll see you next week.
See ya.